Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here we are, episode 6 of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed. And today, very excited to finally get to some fantasy rookie rankings. So, although we'll discuss, general fantasy style as well, mostly this is going to be only on rookies, and that's like a dynasty focus. So, if you're not familiar with the Dynasty League, you keep every player forever. So, there's no one available other than scrubs on the waiver wire, essentially. So each year your draft is only for rookies because those are the new players coming into the league, and all of the existing good players are already on teams. So we're going to be focused on these rookie rankings. So a little different. Keep in mind, if you haven't done Dynasty before, that basically you care about their overall career. Like, it doesn't matter if someone's going to be more likely to play week 1 of their first season if they're going to play for 10 years and the other guy plays right away but is out of the league in 3 or 4 years. So it's a little more complex evaluation because you may want people that can impact your team quickly, but more importantly is the highest overall value. Are they going to play for 4 years or 10? Are they going to eventually be a wide receiver 1, or are they going to peak at, being a wide receiver 3, but they could be that right now, so a lot more to consider in that regard. We'll definitely mention, where they would fall in normal rankings, which ones are relevant to a standard fantasy league as well, and kind of what different draft levels they'd be at. We got it broken down by position today. So we're going to be going over quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and running back rankings. And without further ado, I highly recommend Dynasty, by the way. This is only my second year being in one. I started the Dynasty League last year. It's only a 10-man, but it's really fun knowing that you have your team forever. And so you basically have the ability to trade future draft picks, which makes trades way more likely. It's hard to find trades that are even for both teams. And if you're in a league where the trades aren't close to even, then it's not really fun because there's people that don't know what they're doing and they don't set their lineup. And then there's other people that are going to take advantage of them in trades, which then makes the league less fun for the other good players or the people in the middle. So highly like Dynasty because you can trade future draft picks, and that makes it way easier to get trades completed, which just makes the league more action, more fluid, and an ability to upgrade your team quicker in that regard because you have other capital to stack or utilize, or build your team up quicker. If you know you're not competing this year and you got older guys on your team that are still good, trade them away for a future asset so you can get your team younger and build quicker. So it's more of like running an actual team in that regard. You're looking at the overall value of assets and not just like, can they play right away or what can they do for me this season? So a couple other caveats to mention. If you have an IDP in your fantasy league, an individual defensive player, then there's almost no question. You have to go Travis Hunter, especially if you're in Yahoo or Sleeper. I'm not sure what ESPN has updated theirs to yet, but Yahoo or Sleeper, the rules currently for Travis Hunter, since they don't know if he's going to play offense or defense or both, he's currently able to be slotted in as an IDP, and you would also receive all of his offense or defensive stats, regardless of whether you had him at wide receiver or IDP. So then you put him at IDP because a potential wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 this year, a guy taken 3rd overall, the Heisman winner, and who the Jacksonville traded up for, you could put him in as your IDP, and he could be he'd be by far the best IDP of the year, assuming he doesn't get injured. So that would just basically allow you to stash a high upside wide receiver in your individual defensive player spot, which is basically unfair, but he's such a hybrid that I don't know a better way to do that. So if you have an IDP league, then I would suggest taking Travis Hunter number 1 overall and stashing him in that spot. If you don't have an IDP league, then he's definitely still like a high pick, but not quite over Gene T or maybe a few other players as well, as you're about to find out. So we're going to start off with the quarterbacks today. They're pretty clear cut as far as who has value and who doesn't immediately, at least. Cam Ward is the only quarterback that's expected to start right away who was drafted high and invested in. So if you're in a dynasty league or a regular standard fantasy league, Cam Ward is the guy to have. I don't think he's worthy of number one overall picks in normal leagues. If you have a super flex, then Cam Ward should be considered up there, definitely in the top 3 picks, because there's no other legitimate quarterbacks coming out of this draft that you can bank on putting up stats right away and having, the highest of upsides. So Cam Ward's super valuable for sure. He's definitely my QB1 in both league styles, and would rank him even higher on my big board if you're in a super flex league for sure. After him, everyone else is basically projects. There are a couple other guys drafted high, but Shaw, I've been calling him. I think it's actually pronounced Shuck, which don't see how you get that from there. But for the Saints, he was picked, I believe, 40th. He's got a chance to beat Rattler and Hayner out, but they're an untalented team, and he probably won't start right away. So if you're in normal fantasy, that would be maybe like a late 2-round flyer at best, or a guy you star so you can pick him up off the waiver wire, if he ends up getting the starting job or playing well. Same thing with Jackson Dart, who is actually my number 2 quarterback in my Dynasty rankings. Jackson Dart was taken 26th. He's the second quarterback taken, and although Russell Wilson is supposed to be the starter for now, Dart's probably going to play this year, and the Giants probably aren't going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to fire their regime, and then Jackson Dart's going to be with the new regime next year and likely be the starter, would be my guess. So that certainly means it's not very secure. I wouldn't take him in the first 2 rounds of a dynasty draft. He's more like a 3rd or 4th round. He's not a guy you're looking to play this year. He's a guy that you want to put on your practice squad for quarterback depth if you think that he has a lot of potential. So that's the second quarterback, and I wouldn't even have him in the first couple rounds easily. And so third, I have Will Howard. Honestly, he didn't go until the 6th round for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but all they have is Mason Rudolph. So there's a chance he plays as a rookie. And the Steelers are a team that has traditionally been good at supporting quarterbacks by having strong defenses and good running backs as well, and good coaching overall. So I think that, again, this is only a practice squad. Cam Ward is the only quarterback that basically you'd actually want on your active roster right away. He's the only one you'd want to draft not in the last 2 rounds of a standard league, or draft borderline at all to not, to actually have on your active roster. After that, all these guys are practice squad level players or dudes that you stash or star on the waiver wire in order to pick them up if you think their situation's getting hotter later this year and next year. So 1, Cam Ward by a mile. 2, Jackson Dart. 3, Will Howard. 4th, I have Shedeur Sanders. I know Dylan Gabriel got drafted in the 3rd and Shedeur went in the 5th, both to the Browns, but I think he's a more pro-ready quarterback, and I think that although he did probably show a lot of cockiness, I think that he's good enough to realize that, and I think that he's good enough to make that change and improve. I think that he has a better chance of being a long-term starter than Dylan Gabriel for the Cleveland Browns, and so I think that although he's not much of a rusher, I think that he could potentially be a, average to low-end starting quarterback in the league for a few years. Probably not this year, but that's possible, considering they have, no one ahead of him that has a future. Pickett doesn't have a future as a starter in the league. Flacco, not beyond this season and not who you want to be given reps. And so if he beats out Gabriel, he could be starting quicker than we think a couple months into the season. So 4th is Sanders. Again, he's still practice squad, but you would probably have to draft him just because of how much notoriety he's had around the entire process. But that's a late round draft pick still, and basically just for Dynasty. So 5, I got Tyler Shuck or Shaw, whatever, from New Orleans. I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to be that good, and I could see them being horrible and drafting another quarterback next year. Jake Hayner and Rattler are non-factors, so he's probably going to start this year. And in regular leagues, he'd probably be the guy you want up there, higher. But I have him as 5th in this because ultimately I care more about upside and career longevity when you're looking at a dynasty draft, and he does not have that, in my opinion, but he will potentially start for a while. So 6th, Jalen Milroe, Seattle, and he was a 3rd round pick this year. Those are the only quarterbacks that I'd even really consider drafting in either style league. Again, a practice squad player, going to be behind Sam Darnold. They just paid him. I don't think that Darnold is a franchise quarterback, although he may be able to play around average for a while. I think ultimately you're never going to be happy having him, nor do you feel like you're a true Super Bowl contender with him at quarterback. I'd imagine by next year, Jalen Milroe Tatairoa is going to be starting a couple games, and so would be a good guy to potentially, as a third-round pick, stash on your practice squad. The only other two guys, the deepest sleepers that I'd even mentioned, brought up Dylan Gabriel. He was a third-round pick, so I think that was a reach personally, and, there's a reason there's only one starter, now two, I guess, with Penix and Tua starting lefties in the league. They're pretty rare. Doesn't mean they couldn't work out. But he was a third rounder, so he's at least worth keeping an eye on, but I definitely wouldn't draft him. And then additionally, Quinn Ewers from Texas, who's now in Miami in the 7th round. Again, wouldn't draft him at all, but worth keeping an eye on for the future. If you see movement, Tua gets, his final concussion, then maybe, he's a guy worth looking at that could play in Dynasty in the next couple years. That wraps up our quarterback rankings, but next up we're going to go to wide receivers. A little bit more interesting here because there's guys, wide receivers, that emerge from basically every round, every single year. Last year, for example, Juwan Jennings puts up just under 1,000 yards, got ejected in the final game of the season for his complete bullshit call to eject him, but he was, I think, 5 or 10 yards short of 1,000. He was a 7th round pick a few years ago by the Niners, and that's just one of many examples. There are guys every year from every round that emerge, and just way more opportunities for them to play, since you can have 6 wide receivers normally on a depth chart rather than 3 quarterbacks or 2, and only one that you want to play ever. So they get a lot more reps in practice, a lot more reps in games, and so my wide receiver rankings, pretty hard to start at number 1 because Travis Hunter is such a wild card. Is he going to switch back to defense? Is he going to play both, which limits both? What league are you in? Do you have an IDP or not? So Travis Hunter has a lot going on him. He also is a lot smaller than Ted McMillan, the other high drafted wide receiver. Travis Hunter went 3rd overall as the wide receiver DB to the Jaguars. Tatairoa McMillan from Arizona State went to the Panthers at pick 8. Personally, I think that if you have the IDP, then I would definitely go with Hunter. But if not, then McMillan would be my number 1 wide receiver on the board. His comp that I kind of like, it's hard to replicate a Mike Evans career, but he's that big body dude. He is 6'4", 219, and he had a 300 plus yard game last year early for Arizona. 4 touchdowns and got tackled in the 1 in it. So he's a monster, and he has the highest of upsides. I would say that I like the Jacksonville situation a little better for the start of the career, but if we're looking at wide receivers, I'm expecting guys drafted in the top 10 to play for 8 to 12 years. And so just because I think Hunter's situation is a little better off the bat with Liam Cohen and the completely new regime in Jacksonville, I think overall Tatairoa McMillan has a higher upside on his career and less question marks because of he doesn't play defense or both, and he's got the ideal size of still being quick, not quite as quick as Hunter, but he's also, I believe, 4 inches taller and, got another 30 pounds probably on him. So I like that Mike Evans type comp. Huge Mike Evans fan. He's been on all but one fantasy team, championship team that I've ever had. So that comp gets me excited. After those two, there's really the top end talent there. After that, it's really a clear drop off from the top 2, Hunter and McMillan, to the other guys. There are a lot of guys that were drafted high, but none of them are going into perfect situations where they have a great quarterback, or it's clear they're the number 1 option, or they were as dominant of a prospect as McMillan and Hunter were last year and the year before, for that matter. I think in my big board, my wide receivers drop off for some spots for a bit after those top 2. Third, maybe surprise to some people, I got Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, who went to the Buccaneers, and he was drafted at pick 19. He's 6'1", 202. The reason I like him a little better is because, one, Baker's just dialed right now, and although it may seem like he's not a franchise quarterback, he's still really young. He's still in his 20s. They just have a high-flying offense. They're going to have a lot of yards, a lot of catches, and Godwin's and Evan are both on the latter half of their career. Evans is probably only going to play, I guess, 2 to maybe 4 more seasons, but he probably wouldn't be able to stay in Tampa Bay for all those. So I guess 2 more seasons, maybe 3. We'll see. He could be wrong there. He's been unstoppable and doubted his whole career, and I'm not going to sell him short, but he is on the back, 9 for sure. Godwin's now had a couple significant injuries with the whole broken leg last year and the torn ACL before. And he's also now, I believe, 31 or 32. So although Egbuka doesn't look like he's going to be, a 1,000-yard receiver in season 1. I think overall that offense with Baker, and I think having both those two guys to be leaders to help teach him puts him in a really good situation for the long term. And fourth wide receiver I have is Matt Golden. He was the first wide receiver the Packers have taken in the first round in like 20-ish years, which, people talked about every year with Rodgers when they were still trying to hold on to him and think they could win another Super Bowl, and they never drafted anyone in the first round. Rodgers never played with first round talent, and so now they drafted Matt Golden in the first round for Jordan Love, who frankly is overrated in my opinion. You'll see where he falls in my quarterback rankings coming out in the next week or so, but he is a good quarterback. He's definitely like at least league average starting quarterback, probably slightly above that, but people are heralding him in like the clear top 10, and I just don't see it at all. He doesn't have a large sample size, and although he's done some good things, he's also done some bad things. He had a turnover in like 7 or 8 straight games last year, interception that is. He also, has now had a couple injuries, and, the last time they were in the playoffs the year before, it ended with him throwing back-to-back picks to Dre Greenlaw to lose a close game. So not saying he doesn't have high upside there, but he isn't an established like elite by any means. Shouldn't even be in the same conversation as Jordan Love. Not to mention they might have the most confusing and unknown fantasy wide receiver situation. I think they do, of any single team in the NFL. They have so many guys in there. They had all 4 that were going around last year with Dobbs and Watson, and then they have the 2 other guys too, blanking on their names right now. And now not only do they have those 4 guys, but then they also throw in 2 more this year. They didn't just draft Matt Golden in the first round with the 23rd overall pick. They also drafted Savion Williams out of TCU, and I think the 3rd round. That's also a super high pick. So now they just have like a half dozen guys, some good, some not, so we'll see where all those guys pan out. But also Golden doesn't have a humongous frame. He's 6 foot 195. He's known as a burner, so I'm not saying he couldn't have high volume, but he's not a guy that I see with the highest of ceilings nor the best of situations with the cloudy wide receiver room and the average starting quarterback. So that's why he falls below Ibuka to me, and definitely below the other 2 guys by a mile. Next, I got Jack Betch from the Raiders. He's out of TCU. He's my 5th ranked Dynasty wide receiver rookie this year, and he's 6 foot 1, 214. The reason I like him is I think he can contribute right away. They have Jacoby Myers, and then they have their tight end out of Georgia who had like the best tight end season ever last year. So I think Brock Bowers, that is, I think he'll be a perfect 3rd weapon with Bowers and Myers. Myers is a little older now, so I think he's enough to draw some attention away, but I think that Betch could emerge as the number 1 wide receiver for that team's number 2 target to Bowers. Now they also have Geno Smith, who's a much more accurate, consistent passer than what they had last year in Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. So I like his ability to impact right away. 6th, Jaden Higgins. He plays for Houston now. He was drafted out of Iowa State, and he's got a much bigger frame. I like that 6'4", 214. Houston's had some wide receivers around there, but they got rid of Diggs. They've had some injury issues with other guys. So Tank Dell's been injured. So I do think that he could slot in potentially as a 2 quickly. We'll see how Dell's injury's doing. They also got Nico Collins, and so he came off and was a top 2 or 3 wide receiver in the league for the first 5-ish weeks last year, but then he's been injured. So with the injuries to both those guys and with Diggs leaving, I think that Jaden Higgins could emerge quickly. He was drafted at pick 34 too, so they spent a lot on him, means they think he's really good, and they also will want him to succeed with investing that much in him. So Jaden Higgins is my 6th wide receiver in my rookie dynasty rankings for 2025. Next up is Trey Harris, number 7. Trey Harris from Ole Miss. He's 6'2", 205, and he's now on the Chargers. Justin Herbert is elite. Yes, he hasn't won a playoff game yet. Yes, there is something left to be proven there, but his skills and his talent, his ability to pass the ball around consistently is phenomenal, and I think that they're just looking for another receiver there to step up. Obviously, they had Ladd McConkey step up last year, and he was fantastic, but they brought Mike Williams back. He always had high potential, but he's had many years to prove it now, and he's just not going to be a complete weapon. He's going to be injured, and he's going to be flashy, but not consistent. And then additionally, they spent the high pick 2 years ago on Quentin Johnson. He's busty. He bounced back a little bit to not be completely irrelevant, but he still cost them a game with a huge drop. He's just not going to figure it all out, and I imagine this will be his last year on that team. So I think that Trey Harris will have a spot to emerge with Ladd McConkey as the two wide receivers of the next handful of years for the Chargers under the Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh era. And so I like his opportunity there. Would have him a little higher potentially because of that upside, but they're always going to be a balanced team or potentially a run-first team, if anything. So although I think they'll pass plenty due to Herbert's natural strengths, I don't think they're ever going to be one of the pass happiest teams in the league. Number 8, I got Pat Bryant. He plays for the Broncos now, was drafted out of Illinois, and that was the 10th pick of the 3rd round. They've needed some wide receivers to step up for a while. They got Marvin Mims, but he's never really put it all together. And although I've been a Cortland Sutton fan in the past, he's now been around a while and never really emerged as an elite or clear number 1 target. Sean Payton, now really looking to develop his own offense, and Bo Nix had a great rookie year. So them two together, adding a young weapon that they drafted high, I think that he has a chance to emerge. Maybe not right away, but in the next year and a half as a top target and in what could be a much improved Denver offense. So he's 6'2", 204, so pretty big frame. We got 2 other wide receivers in our rookie rankings for this dynasty, and then a couple honorable mentions. So Luther Burden was drafted high from Chicago. The Bears, believe in the 2nd round, in like round pick 39 or so, but the Bears just have too many weapons now, and they don't have a quarterback that's proven that he can spread the ball around to everyone. Not saying he's a bust. Caleb Williams has yet to prove that he can be a high-level quarterback distributing it, and the weapons that they already have Rome Odunze, who's drafted in the top 10 last year. They already have DJ Moore, who's proven that he is a great wide receiver over the last 5 productive seasons. They also drafted Colston Loveland with the 10th overall pick, so obviously they're going to want to get him involved. They still have Cole Kmet, not to mention running backs. So I don't really see much room for Luther Burden to be putting up a ton of volume anytime soon, nor do I know for sure that Caleb Williams is going to be a great quarterback. So he was drafted pretty high. I only have him at 9th for those reasons. 10th, Kyle Williams. That name still haunts Niner fans. Maybe one day we'll win the Super Bowl and forgive him fully. I have Kyle Williams 10th. He plays for the Patriots now. He's out of Washington State, smaller guy, 5'11", 190. They need weapons. They have one of the worst, before drafting him, wide receiver rooms in the NFL, but Drake May has shown some ability to be a gritty and capable young quarterback. So I think with some increased protection with Kyle Williams, they can hopefully make a big bond together, and he'll be getting a lot of targets early on because there's room for anyone to emerge for targets, and they invested a lot in him. So I got to imagine that I wouldn't expect like week 1, but he could be putting up some stats right away. Now, I don't know how much upside he has to be an elite wide receiver 1 in the future, which is why he's 10th in my rankings. But I do think that he'll be able to contribute quickly due to his situation with a good quarterback and a lack of other wide receivers on a team. My honorable mentions, who are guys, all these guys in Dynasty will be drafted, in my opinion. All 10 of them are draft worthy. Unlike the quarterbacks, who only one was clearly draft worthy and the others were practice squad level players, all those 10 guys should be drafted for sure. The first 2 guys in the first round for sure, I would say they're going to be in the top 5 picks, to Tyrone McMillan and Travis Hunter. The other guys, the next group, maybe late 1 through, early 3 for the bulk of those guys, and then I'd imagine Burden's going to get drafted in that range too, but I don't think he's going to be worth it. And then Kyle Williams and these guys will be more like late 3rds to 4th round picks that you may want to start on your practice squad also, depending on your depth chart, but that you could hope to elevate this year, if not next year, if things go well. So one is Alec Ayamanor. He was drafted in the late 4th by the Tennessee Titans. They've been pretty devoid of successful wide receiver play since DeAndre Hopkins was out of his prime a few years ago, and had a whole bunch of guys they've tried to have step up since. So there's definitely room for him. He's out of Stanford, and so, they're going to hope that he pairs really well with Cam Ward and the rookies can build a significant bond and get him going. Wouldn't be someone I expect in the first couple months of the season, but maybe to come on later in the year or for the next couple years. So practice squad for that guy. Next is Jordan Watkins, who's a Niner. He's from Ole Miss. He was drafted in the fourth round, and he ran a 4.37 40, so super fast, medium frame, 5'11", 196. The reason I like him is because they lost Debo. McCaffrey is a humongous injury concern. Kittle's still great, but he's up there. So basically, Jennings only 1 year left on his deal. So if Jennings balls out and goes for another 1,000, I don't know that the Niners are going to be willing to pay him what the open market could pay him. So Jennings could be gone next year. Pearsall hasn't emerged so much that he's clearly entrenched ahead of him. So although it does take wide receivers some time to adapt to the NFL as rookies, especially in Shanahan's history, I do think that Watkins, if he's got game, could establish himself because Ayuk's coming off an injury. Jennings could be gone. Debo is gone. Kittle's getting older. So there's room for someone else to step up there. We'll see how Pearsall does. Watkins certainly is going to have a shot. And the final honorable mention, wide receiver, Torrey Horton from Seattle. He's Colorado State. He's 6'3", 196, led the size, 6'3", and ran a 4.41. They traded away DK Metcalf and let Tyler Lockett go. So they're going to need weapons, and they took him in the middle rounds. So I think that he's a guy who could step up early and be like a potentially a wide receiver for them for the next handful of years. So that wraps up my wide receiver rankings. Again, we had high upside guys at 1 and 2 with Tetairoa, McMillan, and Hunter. Then we had Ibuka, Golden, Betch, Higgins, Harris, Bryant, Burden, Williams, and our honorable mentions of Io Manor, Watkins, and Horton. Probably all of those guys are going to get drafted. Wide receivers last the longest in the league, probably of any position, especially of notable guys, much longer than running backs, and a bunch of them can play, unlike quarterbacks. So I think their wide receivers are always going to be what's drafted the most of, in my opinion, for those reasons. Also tight ends, normally not multiple getting a lot of looks on a team, and a lot of teams don't even give their number one a ton of looks, nor are there more than a dozen who are really athletic enough to be high receiver quality, fantasy quality. So I think all those guys and a few more will be drafted in the Dynasty drafts. Next up, we're on tight ends, and I got 8 tight ends that I think are noteworthy for Dynasty rankings. At number 1, tight end, definitely for me, Tyler Warren. He went from Penn State, and now he's a Colt in Indianapolis. He wasn't the top tight end taken. That was Colston Loveland, we mentioned, to the Bears at 10, but he went in the top half of the first round too, and I believe pick 14. He was a much more established receiver as far as volume in college, and I also like his situation better. Although Anthony Richardson, completed less than half of his passes, I think that there's way less weapons in Indianapolis. He's going to be motivated to improve, or they're going to be willing to replace him in not too long if he doesn't, and there's way less weapons and more clarity in that situation than Loveland, who, as I mentioned, the Bears' weapons could be option 3, 4, 5, 6, with a whole bunch of guys there, and don't have a historically high scoring offense or a proven quarterback there. So I definitely like Warren over him. And I think that Warren is a first-round talent for Dynasty drafts. It doesn't matter that Richardson's been shitty there now. He could still be good year 1, and if not, he'll be gone. Richardson will be gone, and Warren will have many years ahead of that with high upside receiving. So my number 2 is Harold Fannin Jr. He's got another solid frame, a little shorter than Warren, but he's 6'3", 241. And he had absolutely insane college production. A lot of NFL tight ends had no production in college. They just, their offenses didn't throw the ball to tight ends, or they were used primarily for blocking or whatever, but they're athletic. So a lot of the guys in the mid-late rounds are really just like prayers. Harold Fannin Jr. is the fucking opposite of that. This dude literally had 1,555 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. His issue is that he went to Bowling Green, so not one of the major top 40-ish programs, or one of the hardest schedules for that matter. So that's why he fell to the 3rd round with the Browns. But I don't care that Njoku's there. Njoku's kind of old. I think that they drafted this dude for a reason. I think that whatever quarterback emerges is going to find him open a lot. And Njoku may still be there for some touchdowns, but I don't think he's going to be a high volume target catch guy for much longer. And Fannin Jr. has proven in college that he's an elite receiver. I don't care if you're at Bowling Green. If you're putting up 1,500 plus yards and double-digit touchdowns, you're a baller. So I got him as my tight end 2. And tight end 3, we do get to Loveland, who I've already basically covered. You know, he went 10th, 6'6", 248. Super crowded offense, has Komet potentially ahead of him still, and 3 wide receivers with high pedigree. So I just don't see the volume there. I'd rather have a guy who's less talented, who has less guys taking snaps or taking targets away from him, or a more successful quarterback. So Loveland's 3rd. 4th, Terrence Ferguson. Now he's one that's definitely going to be looked at in standard fantasy leagues this year because he's expected to potentially pass Higbee and be the 3rd weapon on receiving weapon on the Rams quickly. They got Devontae Adams and they got Nakua, but they love to throw the ball. They love to use 1 and 2 tight end sets, and Matthew Stafford's strength is slinging the ball. So I think that that's one of the quarterbacks. You know, he's not going to be there for long, but that's a quarterback that can help this guy get off on a great start. So I would draft him in, you know, the mid rounds potentially in regular leagues, and in Dynasty probably be like a mid to late 2nd round pick for me. I don't know that he has the highest upside of a couple of the guys I mentioned before, but he is going to be solid. They invested a lot in him. So I do think that he'll make an impact quickly. Could be the leading tight end in receiving yards as a rookie potentially. Probably not, but I do think he'll be 2nd or 3rd. Next up, 5th tight end, Elijah Arroyo from the Seahawks. He came from Miami, and he was drafted in pick 50, so late 2nd round. And I think that, again, just like I had the honorable mention wide receiver before, Seattle needs guys to step up. They drafted this guy even higher than they drafted the wide receiver by far. 2nd round pick. So they're looking for him to make an instant impact, and they have snaps to give. Darnold was throwing the ball a lot last year, and their main weapons are gone. So this dude could be in right away. And again, doesn't have the number 1 upside of the draft class, but has pretty solid upside with his intangibles, his size, and, you know, coming out of Miami, and could be, he's another tight end that you're going to want to draft for sure in regular leagues, and draft probably in the late 2nd to early 3rd in dynasty leagues. Next is Gunnar Helm. He is with the Titans now. He's from Texas, 6'5", 241. He had 60 catches, 786 yards, and 7 touchdowns last season, and they had a lot of weapons on offense. You know, a lot of places the ball could go. He was in the middle of the 4th round, pick 18 by the Titans. Another rookie that, you know, spent an extra time with Cam Ward, and who I'm sure they're hoping can help be the foundation of a future nucleus of a not horrible team. You know, they had the number 1 overall pick this year, so they got a long way to go. But I think that Gunnar Helm should definitely get some targets year 1. He's probably more of a practice squad guy, but some dude you may elevate, you know, if he starts producing halfway through the season or something, or that may look to be a better pick for, you know, your 2nd year in Dynasty, or a better play. By that I mean not on the practice squad in year 2, most likely. Next is Mason Taylor. He was drafted high by the Jets. He was pick 42, so early middle 2nd round by the Jets. He's 6'5", 251. He had decent yards, but only 6 touchdowns over 3 years at LSU. So not overly excited with his production, that's for sure. Not saying he'd be a bad pick or a bad tight end, but when you're picking someone at pick 42, he's relatively unproven in that regard. Probably got more eyes on him because he's the son of Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, who was a defensive end for 15 years in the league, 13 of which with the Dolphins. And he had 139 and a half career sacks, so that probably helped bring some attention his way. Also being at LSU, you know, one of the top farms for the NFL as far as college programs of the elite talent and competition. And then finally, my last tight end, number 8, Mitchell Evans from Carolina. He's on the Panthers now, drafted out of Notre Dame, 6'5", 258. He had right around 420 yards last year, so not a ton of production. He was in the late fifth round, and so I don't see a super high ceiling for him, but he is someone that may, eventually threaten the fringe tight end one role. By that I mean top 12, essentially, tight ends in fantasy eventually. He's someone who would be a late round flyer for me in a dynasty draft, maybe if you haven't drafted the tight end already in the mid to late fourth round. Not someone I would look at in normal fantasy drafts. I wouldn't look at Taylor either, and probably not Helm this year. Maybe a late round flyer on Helm, but all the other guys, Arroyo, Ferguson, Loveland, Warren, and Fannin, are all guys that I would draft this year in regular and in dynasty leagues, just varying from early to late, depending on the order of which had them ranked there. Finally, the list we've all been waiting for, the running back rankings, most exciting. That's what everyone wants in fantasy. Couldn't be more clear. The running backs are exciting because a lot of these other positions, normally you don't have guys contribute that significantly that aren't drafted high. Running backs, you can have guys drafted any round and they could get a chance because every running back in college has to be so talented. That's the position where the most talented people go, in my opinion. So they're all really good, and anyone in the league's got a shot. They just need to get that shot as far as reps. But injuries happen all the time. You see, the Ravens and the Niners and multiple other teams they lose 2 or 3 running backs a year, and all of a sudden the fourth guy in the depth chart's getting a ton of looks. Last year is Garendo. So running backs are exciting. Ashton Jeanty is the head and shoulders, by far, clear number 1 running back. If you're taking a running back, if you need a running back, he's probably going to go pick 1 overall in every league that isn't the IDP Hunter situation. Maybe some people consider Ward if they're in a super flex league with quarterbacks and they really need a quarterback or really like him. But basically, Jeanty should be a universal, just about first overall pick. He had the second best college running back season, basically in the history of college football last year, to Barry Sanders, and he had almost caught him in yards. Last year, he had 2,600 rushing yards and 30 touchdowns in 14 games. That is absolutely bonkers. Bummer for him, he didn't get the Heisman, but he got taken 6th overall, deservedly so, to the Raiders, and the Raiders were one of the worst teams for running backs last year, so he's going to be a 3-down back. He's already the starter, and he's got super high upside to join that elite crew of running backs that is clearly at the highest level with Barkley, McCaffrey, the guys that warrant that super high pick because they're going to get all the looks. They can receive and rush. They score touchdowns. They check every box, and that's Jeanty this year. Big separation from him and the next few guys, although there are a lot of other talented, promising running backs this year. Next on my list, I have Omarion Hampton. I was really looking to see who went to the Chargers. One, because I know their identity is going to be running first, both because that's how Jim Harbaugh plays football. Look at his national championship in Michigan. He's got Blake Corum, and he's got an elite defense. That's what they leaned on. That's a big reason why I think J.J. McCarthy was a humongous reach by the Vikings, but we'll discuss that another day. I wanted to see who went to the Chargers because I knew they drafted a running back in the first couple rounds. They want a young guy. They want to be able to lean on a guy. Yes, they signed Najee Harris, but that's only a 1-year deal for $5.25 million. So, maybe he'll take some snaps early on in the year from him. Overall, Dynasty, we're looking down the road. No, Marion Hampton was fantastic at UNC. He had 1,660 rushing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 38 catches last year, and was also over 1,500 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns the year before. So insane production at a big program. So I want Hampton. I got the 3rd overall pick, and I really need a running back. My problem is so do the 2 guys in front of me, so I'm expecting it to go Jeanty Hampton. But if Hampton is on the board at pick 3, I'm taking him. Obviously Jeanty, but he's going to go 1. Next up, my 3rd running back, Quinshon Judkins. This got a little hard. For me, it was a super clear 1, a pretty clear 2 with Hampton, but then it gets a little murkier because as we saw, the 2 Ohio State running backs went, there's only 1 pick in between them in the early 2nd round when they went to the Browns and they went to the Patriots. So Judkins is who the Browns took 2 picks before the Patriots took his teammate from Ohio State, Travion Henderson. I like Judkins a little more. I think that he's a little bigger. I think he's more likely to get touchdowns off the bat. I think that also His main competition right now is Jerome Ford, who I think, has actually performed pretty decent for his pedigree, but I don't think that's a huge guy in his way. And we'll see, the Browns, they have been decent recently, were horrible last year. Got to figure out their quarterback situation, but I like Judkins a little more. So I got Henderson at 4. Henderson's only 5'10", and so he's a little smaller, whereas Judkins is 6 foot and 221, so he's a pretty big running back. And so Travion, I got it 4. Hard to really know who's going to be better right away and long term for those two guys, but they're both in the same boat as not elite running back prospects, but the next level. I'd expect both those guys to go in the first round of dynasty drafts, just more in the mid first round to late first round. And the competition that Henderson has off the bat is Ramondre Stevenson and Gibson. I think Gibson's although I liked him a couple of years ago, I think he's fallen off pretty quickly, which is why in general I value wide receivers a little higher than running backs in Dynasty, because you're able to have them for a longer period of time. There's more touches to go around for them. And basically, if you're not the starter or a bell cow, you're not going to put up a ton of production at running back, more likely to be injured and thus less likely to have a longer career. And if you're saying you get this dude for 6 years or this wide receiver for 10, although you may need a running back, a wide receiver, if you're getting 4 extra years on him, could be humongous value, because then you can use him for just as long and still trade him away when he's an asset, or still have him as a declining asset for those last handful of years of his career. So next up at 5th, I got RJ Harvey. He went from University of Central Florida to Denver, the Broncos. He's smaller, 5'8", 205, but man, his production is super high also in college. 1,577 rushing yards and 25 touchdowns after having 1,416 rushing yards and 18 touchdowns in 2023. He was a late round 2 pick, and Denver could use him. He's really just got to beat out. There's Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin, none of which scare me. I think RJ Harvey's going to take that over within a month or two of the season started. It's just a matter of whether he's going to be a full 3-down back quickly, or one of those guys is still going to be taking some snaps from him. But I like him. He ran a 4.40, so he scores touchdowns. He's a fast rusher, and so I like him a lot. I think that he would be probably a very early or second round pick in Dynasty, and maybe a very late first round pick if a lot of running backs went and you're needy there. And next up, 6th, Caleb Johnson. He's 6'1", 224, and he was the 19th pick of the 3rd round from Iowa. He's on the Steelers now and now replaces Najee Harris, who left to the Chargers. So he's going to be in a tandem with Jaylen Warren, but I think we saw that Jaylen Warren's never going to be a full 3-down back, getting hundreds and hundreds of rushes a year. So he should have a role right away, and if he's super good, he could take away the first 2 downs for sure, and potentially even more from Warren in time. They normally treat in Pittsburgh their running backs pretty well as far as giving them snaps right away. So I think that he could be pretty productive quickly. Might be in normal fantasy, could be an RB3 by the end of his rookie year. He's a guy I wouldn't be practice squatting. I'd be having on my active roster, as are the other 5 running backs I named prior. So next up, 7th, I have Bashul Tatoon from Jacksonville out of Virginia Tech. He's 5'9", 206. He ran a 4.3, 240. So that's the fastest that I saw when evaluating any of these guys. He had 58 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns last year, hella fast. Why I like him is because although ETN's been around, he really regressed last year, first off, and more importantly, there's a whole new regime. We got a new general manager. We got Liam Cohn in there, who was riding Bucky Irving like crazy last year in Tampa Bay. So I know he likes his backs. He chose this back, and this dude's fast. So I think he's going to have a role right away. May still be with Tank Bigsby in there. We'll see what ETN's up to. But I got to imagine ETN's probably not going to be with Jacksonville for more than another season or so. And he also just fell off in quality, So I like Tatoon. I think he's a 2nd round pick and in Dynasty, and he was drafted the 2nd pick of the 4th round by them, and I think that Cohen also throws to his running backs a good amount, and so I like Tatoon still as a guy that I probably wouldn't have on my practice squad, because I don't know about other leagues, but in my league, your practice squad, you can't refill the spot once the regular season starts. So you don't want to put guys on there that you think you might pull off in the first month or two, because then you can't stash as many people. I think he's a dude who could contribute in the first month or two. So he's someone that I would look at probably in the early third of my Dynasty draft, and who I would have on my active roster right away. After Tattoon, there's a whole bunch of other guys. I'm sure one or two of the running backs will emerge and have a significant role for a season or two with teams, but none of them I was too confident on. All these guys are more flyers, and maybe the late third or, the fourth round or undrafted free agents of your Dynasty League. These guys include Jaden Blue, who went to the Cowboys via the Texas Longhorns. He was the 11th pick, around 5. My issue with him, they got Javonte Williams that they signed and Miles Sanders, so I don't foresee him having any impact this year. That's a practice squad level guy for me. Cam Scatterbo, pretty notable from Arizona State. Fantastic season last year, but Tyrone Tracy looked like one of the best rookies I saw all last year for the Giants. I believe he was a 5th round pick last year, but he far outplayed that pedigree right away. So I don't imagine that Scatterbo is going to be passing him anytime soon. And also, he was like one of the slowest running backs. He ran a 4.7 40. So not a huge fan of the 40, but that does stand out. You want to be an outlier only in one direction, not in the other directions. That might affect him as well there. And Devin Singletary still in the mix there also, who's decently established. Definitely, wouldn't draft Scatterbo ahead of the last few picks of the draft, and he'd be a total practice squad guy. The other two are Devin Neal, who came from Kansas, is now in New Orleans. 6th round pick. He's behind Kamara, and I think the Saints are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. They're a 3-headed monster of young, not high prospect quarterbacks, although they did draft Shuck in the 2nd round. He wasn't highly heralded or talked about for much of the draft season, and the other two guys have already proven they're not starter quality, so I think their team's going to struggle big time, and they'll be potentially taking a quarterback again next year. And finally, we got Jordan James, who was a 5th round pick of the Niners from Oregon. So we mentioned McCaffrey. He's been significantly injured 3 of the last 5 years. The other 2 years, he was the number 1 and number 2 running back in fantasy. So it's literally boom or bust for him, because I don't think he was in the top 3. He was maybe a running back 3 one of the other years that he got hurt. So I think that, he's not expected to get much playing time right away, but he could potentially beat out Garendo. He'll certainly have a chance to impact right away for the number 2 spot. And if McCaffrey's not elite or healthy anymore, then that number 2 spot's going to be getting a significant amount of looks. So if he beats out Garendo, he could be involved, and then McCaffrey goes down, he could be very involved significantly. So that's a guy I'd practice squad, but one that if circumstances occur, I could waste that practice squad on and take him up quickly if McCaffrey goes down, and he's going to be one of the main 2 backs there. So that concludes all 4 of the main offensive position groups for these Dynasty rookie rankings. Thanks for listening to the last section here. We're going to go over my top 10 big board. So that's all these rookies combined, and this totally varies based on, if this is Dynasty, what positions of need do you have? So that's a big factor here. Also, are you in a super flex? Changes Ward's value. Do you have the IDP? Changes Hunter's value. But overall, I'm still going to have G&T number 1. I'm going to have Tyrone McMillan number 2. Travis Hunter number 3. Obviously, a lot of variability there. Some red flags and some huge upside depending on your league. And then number 4, Omarion Hampton. 5, Tyler Warren. First tight end there. 6th, Cam Ward, first quarterback. 7th, I got Igbuka, the wide receiver from the Buccaneers. 8th, Quinshon Judkins. 9th, his buddy Travion Henderson. And 10th, I got my second tight end, Harold Fannin Jr. So that's my big board for the rookie Dynasty rankings. We'll be coming out with a new episode of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed soon, and we will definitely include our top franchise QB rankings, the top 16, and maybe a few honorable mentions for the NFL starting quarterbacks. And so expect that out in the next week or so. And appreciate everyone for listening. This has been episode 6 of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed. And have a good evening. Thank you for listening to this episode of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed. You can find all of our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. If you have other content that you want to hear our takes on next, follow us and send us your suggestions on Instagram at Big Dawg, that's DAWG, Sports Unleashed.